For y'all to listen, I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Harry. Good morning, Marcella. How's everybody doing?
Good morning.
Morning. Marcella Nunez-Smith is here with us, and she was kind enough to send some of her bio information to me. And I noticed, Marcella, some of the things you did, but I didn't realize that. Are you getting 4 checks because you're the associate professor of medicine, public health and management, and founding director of the Equity Research Innovation Center? So that's 4 checks for med school, the School of Management. I'm just curious. I'm just curious how you're able to do that.
Oh my goodness, it's such a pleasure to be with you today, Tom, and thank you. And I definitely need to work on all the many titles and jobs, but it's still 1 check.
Still 1 check, okay. But again, associate professor of medicine, public health and management, and founding director of the Equity Research and Innovation Center. We're going to cover a few things this morning. We have about 45 minutes, Marcella, so it's a good pace. And I got to tell you that selfishly, I'm publicly announcing that this is your maiden voyage on the Tom Ficklin Show, but this is not your last journey.
I'm so glad to hear that. This is overdue. I'm so pleased to be here.
You will be returning on a regular basis. So just keep that in mind. I've spoke with your secretary and Maurice Williams and other people that control your life, and
you got it.
You're locked in. Let's start off with what I was really intrigued with. You were involved with a national poll. I mean, people will hear about the Quinnipiac poll and Reuters and what's the advertising one? Nielsen ratings. You'll hear about all these polls going on, but I was really intrigued. A national poll that little old Marcella was involved with, coordinating with. I mean, you had some partners, but tell us a little bit about that, because it wasn't a poll in terms of just who's your favorite team or who you want to vote for. I mean, this was really, really incredible in terms of the COVID, the plague, the national and international crisis we're undergoing.
Absolutely. So with all seriousness. So you're right, and thank you. I'd love to share with your audience some about that poll and what we found. So this was led by the African American Research Collaborative. The principal of that AARC organization is New Haven's own Henry Fernandez, as well as a partnership with the NAACP and ERIC, which is the Equity Research and Innovation Center that I direct. The goal of the poll was to reach out across the country to African Americans. It was the first national poll to really target African Americans and say, what is your experience with COVID-19? We were able to interact and poll 600 folks in all sort of parts of the country. And this was in the first week of May. So, these questions that we asked were pre the murder of Mr. George Floyd. There was a lot. The poll itself, we had a great team of social scientists and others thinking about what we should ask, and it really ran the gamut in terms of issues. I think, some of the important messages, so people won't be surprised, 40% of the folks who responded had already had an economic hit. They'd either lost their job, they lost hours. Over 30% of respondents were already experiencing food insecurity. So wondering really where the next meal for themselves, their family was going to come from. That's really dire, drastic. We asked questions about the level of trusted messenger. Right? Who do people want to hear from for COVID-19 advice? As a practicing physician, I'm an internal medicine doctor at Yale. I was pleased to see doctors and nurses do very well in terms of being seen as trusted messengers, along with many other kind of community leaders. Least trusted were, the Republicans in Congress and President Trump, who overall got an 80% negative rating from the respondents to this poll. And I think one of the big things for me as somebody working in healthcare was to note that over 60% of people responding to the poll, Tom, were concerned about bias in healthcare. They were worried that, on the whole, Blacks would be less likely to get tested, would be less likely to get admitted to the hospital, would be less likely to have everything done possible to save their lives. And so that's really important for us to think about in terms of healthcare bias, which is real. And so, hopefully we can dig more into that and talk some about the respondents on the poll, the responses around some of the social distancing and other public health measures too.
For sure. And before we move to, because Governor Lamont has asked you to be on the state reopening committee, and we're going to talk a little bit about the fund, the COVID-19 fund that the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and United Way of Greater New Haven have set up, and also about public health messaging, as you mentioned, the importance of people. I mean, in this fall, this winter, flu will kind of happen again, and so vaccines will be needed. And also about, as you mentioned, whether vaccines will be even available at some point for COVID. But let's stick on the poll for a second, because this is not like a routine endeavor. Are you do you intend to do it again? What is your hope in terms of the reason for doing this? People often criticize and even sometimes condemn the academic community for just trying to create reasons to build up their resume. But why is this important, and how do you see it to be part of the solution-driven endeavor?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, this was really the first that we knew of national conversation opportunity to hear directly from African Americans. This, Eric, we're pleased to be a part of it, but I would far from say this was an academic-led endeavor, right? This was led by the AARC, and that research collaborative is really intent on creating and contributing to evidence that will push policy, right? Will push national conversation. That certainly is a value we share at ERIC, and for sure a value shared with the NAACP. We thought it was really important to get the numbers there. So much of this, I think for us, we know the lived realities for ourselves, our friends, our family, but to have a national conversation, we need the data. I mean, this is just the beginning and end. You have to have the data to show who's impacted and who's impacted disproportionately as a call to action. And so that was the main motivation, was to get out there and say, everybody is sort of, aggregating these groups, and we need to understand how African Americans are being uniquely and disproportionately affected by COVID-19, both in terms of health, but also in terms of economics. And these are sequelae that will be long lasting. So, one of the things I mentioned was that we collected the data the first week of May, and so much has happened in our country since then.
Right.
And, I hear you, and I think it remains true that if we repeated that today, I think we would see even sort of greater and really just a more urgent need for action coming out of those results.
Nice try. Let me try to drill down a little bit more. So what's the near term solution desired impact? I'm just so impressed that when you hear these words, NAACP, when you hear Henry Fernandez outfit, and by the way, as you know, our good friend Roger Van is also a New Haven person, and then just to have your research endeavor. But where do you see the legs, the longevity, the shorter long-term impact of doing this again, or why even did you do it? You referenced why you did it in the first place.
Yeah. So let me talk about the healthcare discrimination. This is something we study at ERIC. This is and this squarely, I think, it behooves us as healthcare providers to take up that data and say, what are we going to do with that, right? And as I've had an opportunity to talk to many folks these past weeks about the poll data and just everything we're seeing with inequities in COVID-19, I think it's important for us we talk a lot about the social realities that contribute to disparities in health. And that's true and that's real. We talk less often about bias in healthcare and that the reality that this is well documented. People can always sort of call to mind things like Tuskegee, but that's sadly one of many examples. We know that there are structural problems in terms of healthcare and who has access to it. We also know that there can be problems at the interpersonal level in terms of provider behavior. And so one of the big things for us and for Eric in contributing to this poll and asking specifically about concerns around healthcare discrimination is to raise awareness with our colleagues, with hospitals here locally in New Haven, but around the country. This was a national poll. That we need to be aware that our patients and patients of color have, we've earned mistrust over the years. And that's a barrier, quite frankly, that causes people to delay accessing care, and makes everyone just really concerned once they enter care that they will get fair treatment. And so we need to be looking at data within our hospitals to make sure we aren't contributing to this problem, right? So our initial reflex is to say, I'm not biased, we don't have that problem here. But I think everyone needs to look at their data and have specific metrics that reflect equity. And that's a call that we're making at a structural level. And then on an interpersonal level, I think it's time doctors engage their patients in a conversation about racism in their lives, about discrimination in their lives, acknowledge that reality, and do everything they can to learn and teach themselves so they can be better providers in each interaction.
This is I appreciate that. This is for me, such an important topic. And for whatever reasons, as host of a show, sometimes you can take on the role of a provocateur and not real. So I don't want to put you necessarily on the spot even more, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. But part of me, I hear you saying that even after, if you find out that you're sick and you go to the hospital, you may not be murdered, but you might receive treatment that could save others, and some people might receive treatment that will save them, and others might not receive the same amount of treatment that might harm them. I could phrase it differently if you want me to.
No, I don't think there's a need to phrase it differently. I think, what the poll showed is people are concerned that that's what's happening and that's what's going to happen. And I think
if I go to the hospital.
Yes, that's what the poll said. If I go to the hospital, I will not get offered the same treatments and therapies. I will not have everything done to save my life. I mean, to remember that there was an ongoing conversation about kind of rationing and who can get ventilators in the ICU, and some of the algorithms that were being proposed would just almost inherently disadvantage people of color who have more coexisting conditions and other things. So, I often say that we should resist being dismissive, right? We should resist the urge to say, no, why would you have that concern, right? People have that concern because the historical and, quite frankly, even more contemporary realities suggest that is possible. And so we need to look at our data. And we is we in healthcare, look at the data and say, you have this concern, let's look at our data. Let's analyze it in real time and see, are we treating people differently in this time of COVID? And does it end up sort of correlating with race, ethnicity? I think that's the first question. And then the second is, so if the data show that, we have to intervene immediately. We hope the data don't. But regardless of what the data show, quite frankly, people have these concerns, and it's for us to acknowledge them and to be sure that we communicate to our patients that we know these concerns exist, that we're doing everything we can to make sure those concerns don't materialize into reality.
Okay. I'll accept that, but I got to drill down a little further on.
Yeah, yes, I don't mind. And I want to, if I could too say, we already know in terms of healthcare, we have some seminal studies that have shown, sort of disparate access to particular therapies, whether it's people who are living with end-stage renal disease, so that's kidney failure, sort of who is kind of first in line to get a kidney transplant, which is often put out as the gold standard. And by and large, the African Americans, Black and Brown people end up on hemodialysis over any of the other treatments and therapies. And, this is one of our longstanding problems. We've done research showing that if you just alter the race or the the gender of an actor in a vignette study, that providers, even given the same clinical information for each scenario, will make different recommendations. And the only thing that's been changed is some of that demographic information. So this isn't something new that we're grappling with in healthcare. It's not. But the realities in terms of the urgency for everyone to feel like when they need care, they can seek care, it's especially underlying now.
So, and I really appreciate that, everything you've said thus far, and I'm sure I'll appreciate everything else you have to say for the next 40 minutes. But that part of the passion I hear you talking about has manifested itself in your being the founding director of the Equity Research and Innovation Center. Am I correct? So talk to us about that. And are you alone in terms of the medical community in terms of such research centers, or are you an ally with others at other institutions?
Yeah, so great. No, I mean, I'm really pleased to say that we're not alone at all, and we're not even, we're not alone locally in terms of the many colleagues who are, formally and informally part of the work that we do at ERIC. And then we are one of many, many centers nationwide that are based at academic health centers, thinking specifically about health and healthcare inequity and how we reverse that. So the Equity Research and Innovation Center, we're based at the School of Medicine. We were founded in 2013. We aim to support a research portfolio that is action-oriented. And so, we talked about policy. We want to be able to generate data and evidence that policymakers can then use to inform their decision-making. And so as we think about work that's mission-aligned, we really look for research that there is that path to translation in terms of changes in policy and practice. And that's at our center. But we also take very seriously our responsibility to help train the next generation of health equity thinkers and researchers and scholars within academia and even beyond. And so that's a good amount of our work as well. For us, a lot of our research is funded by the National Institutes for Health. Mm-hmm. And we're grateful that the many institutes at NIH, not just the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities, but it's wonderful to be able to say that that's an institute that exists. When I started my career, it didn't. And so at that federal research level, that there is a call for really research as I've described and outlined. And so ERIC is one of many centers nationally, and hopefully, together, especially now, we've been working very collaboratively to think about solutions and interventions. And
Indeed.
I'm thankful to my colleagues.
If you're just tuning in, we're chatting with Dr. Marcella Nunez-Smith, and Associate Professor of Medicine, Public Health and Management, and founding director of the Equity Research Innovation Center. Marcella, I mean, you spent time in Swarthmore, you spent time at Harvard and Cambridge, you're here in New Haven. I know you travel a lot. I do want to talk about some of your international ideas and interventions from a medical standpoint. But where does your hope reside that again, correct me if I'm phrasing this wrong, that those medical practitioners that you're grooming will be better, will be less biased, will be more equitable in their expertise than what the industry has shown for the last 100 years?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the heart of the question, right? I mean, that's our future. I am hopeful. I'm very optimistic. Our students yesterday held white coats for Black Lives protest demonstration. Our students are coming in, and I'm talking not just about our medical students, but all our health professional students, our nursing students, our PA students. People are coming in just with different lived experience already, and we're finding our students are coming in with a level of sophistication and understanding around structural inequality and inequity that frankly, we didn't see even a decade ago. And our students are really calling. They're calling for more in their education. They're calling for more in their curriculum to be able to use their power, their privilege, their voice to make a difference within healthcare for folks. And so, for us at Yale, we've certainly taken all of that very seriously in enhancing the curriculum, in trying to meet student need. You know, the reality is it's not every student though. So there are some students who still ask the question, kind of what is the role of the physician in these, you know, sort of social issues. And so we have these different kind of learners that we need to meet them where they are, right? Those who are quite new to understanding these concepts, and many who have been, you know, quite frankly, leading on these concepts for a long time. But I'm very hopeful. I think it's been wonderful. I've been kind of practicing almost 20 years. It's really wonderful to see this evolution from kind of topics that were kind of seen as extra and, you know, maybe kind of have an optional workshop or discussion to now sort of being integrated across all aspects of the medical school curriculum, really across the country. So I'm very optimistic.
Excellent. I do want to get to the Governor Lamont asking to be on the reopening, because of these different phases of reopening, and God forbid, but I mean, it's likely that we'll have a resurgence of problems down the road. But before I jump there, just elaborate a little bit more, if you would, Marcella, on, you mentioned the workforce development and diversity and community health workers, just that whole panoply. It seems to me if you're a young person, in spite of COVID, might be encouraging people to kind of look at health as a career at some level. So it seems to me this might be a strange opportunity in some ways, that you might have a new cohort of people interested in how can they make the planet healthier.
That would be tremendous. I mean, we have been challenged in healthcare in terms of workforce diversity. There's, you know, and there's lots of historic reasons. It goes back to the Flexner report in the earliest part of the 20th century, when many of the schools, the medical schools that trained Black physicians were closed. And so we've been really trying to recover numbers in terms of representation in the physician workforce since then. And so if you take a national estimate around 13 to 15%, let's say for people of African descent, you know, the numbers in when you look at physicians are much smaller, right? We're looking at 4 to 6% of all physicians. So there is a lot that we need to do. But I'm really appreciative, and this is a time, and I think, you know, for instance, at Yale, we have several kind of pipeline programs to get high school students on board, to get college students on board and exposed really early. And so, you know, this is a great time to recommit and expand those initiatives. But I appreciate that you bring up kind of the entire healthcare workforce. It's not just physicians, right? And so they think about nurses or community health workers. And I think community health workers in particular have a key role to play as we talk about public health education and messaging, as we talk about contact tracing, which I'm sure people have been familiar with. So, you know, if one of the things we see kind of come out of this pandemic is the recognition of the value of the community health worker on the team and an expansion in those programs, you know, that would be a plus.
Let's well, again, just to repeat, this is not going to be a one-off. You will be back, so just let your agent know that we will renegotiate the contract, because these personal appearances are, I know, very costly to me.
I'm happy to hear that I'm still welcome.
You're definitely well. So far, let's see how you do. You get an A so far, but let's see if we grade you on the next.
We still have time.
On the reopening, chat a little bit about that. And people, I think, are still confused, scared. They know in California, the schools are not going to have, well, some classes will have some classes in person, but not a lot. We just heard about the University of Alabama football players being tested positive, and then we see all the marches, and Harry has his mask up to remind us. So, talk about, if you would, your involvement with Governor Lamont's reopening initiative, but also what does that mean? It seems to me how will we be cautious and proactive, but also concerned and also responsible moving forward in terms of your background, in terms of what you hear, the state policies that are being issued, et cetera.
Yeah, great. So Governor Lamont, he, as did many governors across the country, assembled a group of folks who are part of his administration and some, of us who are not, to think together about recommendations, and in particular, the recommendations for the initial phases of the reopening for the state. I had the distinct privilege and honor to serve as the chair of one of the group's committees. And so in terms of the structure, there were 4 subcommittees and one on health. And many people will have heard, a lot of the recommendations around, testing, and even some of the kind of the public health messages around social distancing and other things with the health committee, the importance of data and looking at data, collecting sort of accurate data. Also the education committee. And for many of these committees, we still have, sort of streams that are ongoing and live within the administration now. But I know everyone is very anxious to hear some of the final determinations I know about school in the fall. The education committee thinking about those questions, particularly around really across the age range. So universities, colleges, as well as K-12 education and preschool. And the business committee, of course, thinking about all of the economics of this. And the balance from the beginning was always the balance between economics and public health, of course. And so, they've really advised on some of the parameters for which businesses open when. And I chaired the community committee. And our charge was to think about the people most at risk for severe complications from COVID-19 in the reopen. And so we've been kind of alluding to some of that in our conversation today. Our state, like every other, we're seeing stark differences by race and ethnicity in terms of who's infected, but also who has sort of severe complications. So who requires hospitalization, who requires ICU care, and even who succumbs ultimately to COVID-19. As well as other high-risk groups. So anybody living in a congregate setting, for instance, nursing homes, prisons, group homes, others, thinking about people who might be older, who we might be advising to sort of stay home and stay safe even through these initial reopenings. So I was very fortunate to work with an incredibly dynamic, thoughtful, engaged committee. And we met sort of frequently and furiously for several weeks to begin to think together about some advice. And so what I can say is that we're really happy that Connecticut chose to have a committee focused on, what gets referred to often as vulnerable populations, but that we had a committee that was focused there, made us pretty unique among states. And we were thrilled that Governor Lamont made one of the metrics for reopening, the sort of supports being in place for vulnerable populations.
So, I mean, that background is really crucial. But has the door closed? Are you still convening? Given your experience and your expertise and your passion, it seems to me even after this committee officially disbands, there's going to be a need for us to, our monitoring, our quality control, how do we assess, again, as going back to the original statement of how are we going to receive fair and equitable treatment across the board in this society. So in terms of reopening, are we reopening too soon? Are some vulnerable populations going to take risks? We see that if you go into Target or Home Depot, people just in general not wearing the mask on. So as a physician, I mean, you've alluded to the 20 plus years. This is something you're not doing as a one-off. I mean, one year after the other. So, and you're not ready to retire just yet. I mean, I'll speak for you in that regard. So what goes through your mind as we just in general in terms of reopening here? What advice, concern, suggestions do you suggest that people kind of follow, or what kind of research can they do so they can understand that they can take accountability and responsibility for their behavior?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked, and I think about it kind of two different ways. So one, I would say that for many people, Connecticut didn't close. If you were or are deemed an essential worker, right, or a frontline worker, and you have kind of had to continue from day one to leave your home every day, get to transportation. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that for many people, especially in Black and Brown communities, right, the state didn't close. They still had to get up and go to work every day. And And, we talk often of the, work from home and the social distancing. And the reality is the public health messaging isn't necessarily designed always with everyone in mind. I mean, all of those folks I just mentioned, what does that mean if their job can't be done from home? And the recognition that things like social distancing, that's a privilege. And if you are in a home that's multi-generational, there are people in the home who are at risk, and you're leaving to go to work and coming back, and there are others there, or they're just it's a dense neighborhood. So, I think that it's important to sort of just state that out loud, that for many people, this reopening, it didn't really change their daily existence in that significant a way, because they were already working. But it is important to underscore kind of all of the public health messaging nonetheless, such as wearing, face coverings when in public, wearing masks, washing hands very frequently. All of that remains critical, right, on that individual level. And in that poll, we started off the time together thinking about with AARC and NAACP, we asked people about their adherence to that. And the majority of respondents, again, all African Americans across the country, were really trying to adhere to those recommendations. Where we saw some faltering was around the mask. And quite frankly, many of the respondents, particularly the younger respondents and the younger male respondents, were fearful of wearing masks in public because they thought that put them at risk, right, for sort of police action and intervention. And to remind everyone that this was the first week of May. So, it seems like a very long time ago now. But even then, we saw in the results from the poll that the way that these public health messages, right? I mean, this idea that I'm scared to wear a mask because that will make me a target. And there have been many unfortunate stories covered where that has been the case, particularly for Black men in the country who've been wearing a mask for protection and have gotten stopped by security guards and police and others, and told explicitly they were stopped because they looked threatening because they were wearing a mask. So I think we have more work to do in terms of that public health messaging and thinking about it. But again, these insights are important and invaluable. So, I'll hold that there. To this bigger question of the reopening, no one has a roadmap for this, Tom. Like we don't have any, this is something we're all kind of trying to think through in real time. And so the economic realities are hard. We worry about people's inability to pay rent. There's so much. So I will say that just sort of as one member, the decisions have been thoughtful. We are in a state that values science, that values evidence. And we did set sort of clear parameters and markers to think about the reopening. And I think what's important too is for people to hear, I was saying this to someone yesterday, that sort of each of these phases, you may, right? If you own this kind of business, you may open, but it's not you don't have to open, right? And we still encourage people to be smart. Just one more thing before your next question, Tom, is, I do.
What makes you think I have another question? Huh?
Because you always, you have great questions and you have many, and I want to get to them. But the one point I want to make before sort of giving it back to you is to say, so, we're talking a little bit about the individual, right? The individual and wearing your face coverings and staying separate from other people. But I think also, as we think about disparities and inequities, it's going to always be many levels. So, where and how will we think about accountability moving forward for that? And so, I'm hopeful that we as a state will look to some of the other states and some of the models emerging in other states around things like equity task forces that can continue to do the work in partnership, but really with this lens of intervention and change and accountability. And so, several other states, municipalities are doing that. It's recommended now as best practice by thinking sort of these thought agencies like Brookings and the National Governors Association. So I'm hopeful we'll look at some structure to continue that work, because as you mentioned, the Reopen Advisory Group is officially disbanded as of May 20th. Although I know that all of us really remain available should our help or advice be sought.
I don't have any more questions. You'll just have to talk to a solo soliloquy for the next 20 minutes.
As you can see, I'm quite comfortable with.
Carry on. I'm enjoying just witnessing the act two. I agree. Uh, I mean, on the note that you've just talked about, even if COVID had not happened, you, I mean, as an undergrad, biological anthropology, whatever that means, that you went to med school. So disease, health, that's been something you've been studying, reading, getting graded on, having to take medical boards, having to pass exams on what does health mean. So I think people are still confused and scared even about where is the state, this COVID-19, is this another white plague? Is this going to be worse than the flu epidemic in the early 1900s? What infectious disease? Are we just walking now pollutants ourselves? If individuals can pass along disease to another, does that mean that we're complicit in actually people's murdering people by just touching them or coughing on them? From the medical environment, how do you, what, to a young person that's 18, 19, scared about what does my future mean? Does it mean I can't kiss anybody? I can't have sex? I mean, just the whole fear of infection and hearing this medical issue and death, life and death issue, and in the news, like ridiculous. This will be a newsworthy issue in my mind for another 2 years at least. You won't be able to listen. You can listen to CNN, you can listen to Fox News, you can listen to any of the business channels, but the impact of this globally in terms of, as you say, economics and public health, and not to mention, and I do want to, if you could share some time about your time in studying Africa. I mean, this is now one world, so things, viruses, germs, energy, money is moving galactic throughout the nation, throughout the world at light speed. And so where are we with all that? Okay, I've asked like 5 or 6 questions, but I know I want to get those questions in. So respond to anything.
Yeah, pick. No, Tom, of course. I mean, my my own children are asking these questions, right? When can they go on play dates again? And, will they be able to go back to school, and kind of all our lives? And I think a lot of what we don't talk about is some of the mental health considerations,
Yes.
and social isolation, and just kind of, a wellness, and what it means to have some quality of life too. And so us being able to give guidance on that, I think, is really important. Just the reality, the normalization, saying like, yes, everyone is going to feel a little more anxious, more stressed, the mental health, that's to be expected, but also that we have resources to help people deal with that, that we help create kind of opportunities for social connection.
Yes.
Even if we can't always be together. So, I think that's part of it too, is, yes, you can go out and you can have a socially isolated, time in a park, with your friends, and everybody has face coverings and you stay apart, but you can see each other and be together. So I think you're right that our messages have to evolve to reflect that reality. It can't sort of just be like everyone stay hunkered at home, for 2 years. And so how can you begin to have those social connections and do it safely, whether it's about kind of houses of worship and being able to do that there, if that's an important part of your spiritual life. So I think, all of that is critical. A couple of things that, to get a chance to say, and this comes back to kind of what can I do, right? What can I, as the 18-year-old, what can I do? So we've talked about the face coverings, which is largely about protecting other people, right? So all of the face coverings we talk about, this is a moment to be collective in our care for our neighbor. And so when I put on a face mask, or just a cloth face mask, that's what I, wear to go grocery shopping, everything else, very different than the kinds of, masks that are used in a hospital clinical setting, but just that cloth mask, it's a signal that I care about you, right? I'm wearing that in the event that I am an asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic carrier, and I don't want to shed. And so, to continue to do that, and we've talked about kind of the how complicated a decision that can be. And I know I've seen lots of posts about, kind of men of color saying, I'm going to wear a floral mask so it's less threatening, and kind of these other ideas, but just the idea of the face covering. One other thing that we all need to do is we need to get vaccinated for the influenza this year. And I know this is a longer conversation. I'm happy to come back because there can be so many questions and, misperceptions about the flu vaccine in particular. And people think it gives them the flu. And And it doesn't, or people think that if you get the flu vaccine, then it means you can't get the flu. And it doesn't mean that either. What it means is that if you do get the flu, it should be sort of a shorter duration and not cause as many severe complications as if you didn't have the vaccine. But both in terms of protecting one another, getting that influenza vaccine this year, the idea of influenza and COVID-19, you can have both infections at the same time, right? And so that's not something we should want our bodies to deal with. And then, of course, the health system, just a frame for everybody to keep in mind, all these interventions we've been talking about have been to kind of preserve the capacity of the healthcare system, to not get overwhelmed that we kind of cannot handle the number of patients. And so every year we see a spike in admissions due to influenza. And if we end up with even what we've seen in past years, and we have another wave of COVID-19, the system will get overwhelmed. And so we really need to take every precaution. And so just kind of like, what can I do? What's my part? Like wearing the face covering, doing the washing of the hands. Also get your flu vaccine this year, and that's for everybody.
Would you say in terms, and I appreciate your mentioning about the flu vaccine, should one have it as early as September or October or November?
Yes, as soon, it's not, of course, so it's not available yet, but as soon as the flu vaccine is available, to get it early, absolutely. And I think there'll be a lot of public health opportunities for that. I mean, this has also come out of the recommendations of the Reopen group, that we really be sure that everyone who is willing to have that flu vaccine can get one. So there'll be that. But when you're offered that flu vaccine, please take it.
Let's do some rapid fire questions as we conclude for the next 8 or 9 minutes. Individuals should wear the masks for how through the next year, through December, forever?
People will have heard about the herd immunity. So it's really kind of until we have vaccination, right? Until we have effective vaccines that have been disseminated widely and have been uptaken widely. And so the mask is going to be with us for a little bit of time.
1 month, 2 months, a year?
Yeah, so the vaccine timelines, there's some vaccines that have moved throughout the phases. And so we anticipate that this will be the fastest vaccine kind of developed ever. And there'll likely be many different vaccines. But the reality is it's still kind of 18 to 24 months at least, we would say. So it's
wearing the mask for almost 2 years.
Of wearing the mask. But again, you're not wearing the mask in your home unless you are symptomatic or sick and you're trying to protect other people in your home.
Outside.
But kind of, outside, and it's outside when you can't physically distance, right? So if you're outside taking, on a bike ride or you're on a nature trail, carry something with you so you can cover if you need to. But if you can be apart, sort of in that 6 to 10 feet, then you don't have to have it on all the time that you're outside. We look to our neighbors in Asia who have kind of been dealing with epidemics, right? And thinking about SARS, and they often, will be just wearing masks as a matter of course when they're outside their homes. And so we want to default to that face covering for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so we want to be as comfortable as putting on your hat or putting on your
yes
makeup.
It should just be second nature. I mean, even for the kids have their mask. Remember, kids we think can often be asymptomatic carriers. So when I take my kids out, which is not often because again, going to things like the store, just one member of your family. But if I take them out for like a walk in one of our state parks, I have them each carry their little mask with them in case we encounter anybody on the trails. And so we keep masks and we keep them in the car, right? Like if we're leaving our house, then everybody's got a face covering in the car should it be needed. So it's second nature, just like walk out with your phone and your face covering.
That's important. In the next 5 minutes or so, Marcella, any burning things on your heart? Because you're right, I could come up with 10,000 million things, but it's really just a way to get rid of my stress. Asking questions just helps to relieve my stress. So we don't have time for all that. We could chat for the next 5 days and I still would feel stressful. But I do have 2 or 3 more, but I just wondered if anything that has come up in your consciousness during this conversation.
Well, I really appreciate this moment to be here. And I will say that, I get asked a lot about my concerns around protesters and the risk of COVID-19 transmission doing protest, and is there any advice? And you can be safe in the protest. It's the things we've talked about, right? Having the face coverings, carrying some hand sanitizer. There are certainly, there've been kind of drive-through protests. I resist the urge to make it a binary, right? To say that that people shouldn't be motivated to be out protesting against police brutality, against excessive force, and really protesting for, to me, it's the same conversation. They're protesting for the opportunity for a healthy, long life like everybody else, for it to not be cut down by police brutality or by COVID-19 or by other preventable conditions. And so I say to everybody who is out and is giving voice to the cause and the moment and the movement, to take precaution, to do so safely. But it's certainly still everyone's right to gather in that way.
Let me, I appreciate your sharing that. Jump back to your academic world. I mean, you're interfacing with the School of Management, you're interfacing with the School of Public Health, you're interfacing with the Yale School of Medicine. That's, what are you seeing there in terms of the synergy, or because it seems to me that COVID-19 is impacting how we teach, how we believe, from divinity schools to law school, the impact of this social anthropology crisis seems to me is just causing people to really think about the existential reason for their being, for their why are we teaching this? Does it matter? How are we teaching it? And you've alluded to some of the unconscious biases. So I just wonder, in terms of your connections with School of Management, which is really key, your connection with schools of public health, School of Medicine, only thing you're not covering are the law school and the divinity school, but I'm sure you'll get to that. But any thoughts in that regard? And then I have a follow-up question about the National Institute of Health and how their research is going to be impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there's time for me to be able to say a word about the important role that philanthropy, I think, has been playing for us too. But yes, I think in academia, this is not going to be business as usual. Academia is a really just interesting vantage point for this moment. But kind of every space I'm in, I know the questions you raise are being answered. It is existential. And so I think that everybody sort of begins with, we're not doing lip service, and we're kind of thinking about real strategy, real action. And so I continue to hold that optimism down that it will be reflected in not just the curriculum, which is really important, but just in some institutional policies, institutional practice, that kind of everything gets looked at anew through our new lens of racial justice. And we have work to do for sure, but I certainly haven't encountered anyone in my travels that doesn't agree with that.
And again, please share about, as we wind up, about the role of philanthropy. You've mentioned the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and your involvement with the United Way as well. But what were your thoughts in terms of philanthropy?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think it's important. We have so many assets. We have assets in Connecticut, and we don't often hold them up. We have assets in our Black and Brown communities that we don't often hold up, and all the inspiration around mutual aid and everyone looking out for their neighbor. So, I just like us to take an asset-based frame. We are also one of the wealthiest states, and philanthropy is another asset that we have. I'm fortunate to serve on several boards in New Haven for some great organizations. One is the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, who, along with United Way of Greater New Haven, set up a New Haven COVID-19 fund. That fund has dispersed sort of over $1 million, in addition to other work of United Way and Community Foundation, to get resources out into community at the time when they're most needed. And I think that is, it's it's to be commended that across the state, philanthropy has really, I think, stepped up. At the state level, 4CT was organized by Governor Lamont. They've been a great partner in the reopen work. They've been able to really invest in several important issues, most recently providing a fund for our non-citizen residents, those who are undocumented, to be able to access money. As we know, they're not eligible for the CARES money and the sort of the $1,200. And California established a fund, but I'm happy to say that now in Connecticut, we have one too, and we're looking out for our neighbors. So just wanted to acknowledge the work of philanthropy at this time, right alongside everything else we've been talking about.
For someone, just as we wind up, Marcella, for someone that's just listening and they just want to get involved, they want to share, they want to do their role, live up, they may not be ready to go to med school, or they may be an elder statesman such as myself. But what's your general comment to folks? Because it seems to me that there's a volunteer. When I see all the people on the street, that these are volunteers. These are people kind of just they want to give. They're giving back. They're walking by giving. But what's your kind of message to folks as we move forward about how you can make this world a better place?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so. One real practical thing is the United Way of Greater New Haven has set up a volunteer portal that connects kind of volunteers with community-based organizations and their needs right away. So, they might need drivers for food, for home food delivery, right? And you can get on there and you can say, hey, I've got 2 hours, and what can I do? So I encourage people to visit that volunteer portal at United Way of Greater New Haven. And if anybody is sort of interested in learning more about health professions and what opportunities might exist there, to just really contact me. I'm happy. I love getting those emails and those messages. My email address, it's Marcella, that's Marcella .Nunez, Nunez -Smith, SMITH @yale.edu. And we have some great programs at Yale. Other schools do as well that can really increase people's exposure so they can learn more about the health professions and think about this as a career.
Tremendous. Thank you so much.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is just the beginning. We're going to continue. Marcella, thank you so much. Harry, thank you. Thank everybody for listening. We're going to share this widely. Marcella, I just really appreciate your spending the time. How are you spending the rest of your day as we wind up?
Working.
Well, what are you working on?
Working, absolutely. I mean, it's all the things we've talked about. And we are a research center, and I know we didn't get to talk much about NIH, but NIH has several research opportunities now for thinking about how we intervene quickly and address racial ethnic disparities in COVID-19. And so we're we of course want to be part of that work and part of that conversation. And so some of that is the work that we'll be doing. Good. Anytime you call, Tom, I'll answer. And
you heard that, everybody.
Harry, and kind of all the audience members to please be well and be safe.
Thank you so much, Marcella. Talk to you soon.
Tell
Maurice you said hi.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Yeah, this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. Way too long, we faced them storms. Now you gon' face the dawn you waited for. I said from night to dawn, I right my wrongs alone. In competition